Good afternoon, everybody, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the National Women in Transport panel session. I'd like to start by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, the Jagera people and the Turrbal people, as the traditional custodians of Meanjin, the lands on which we meet today, and pay my respects to Jagera and Turrbal elders past, present and emerging. The National Women in Transport is a partnership initiative between government and the private sector to attract more women into the transport sector. A key element of the initiative is the Women's Speaker Bureau, a bureau of senior women leaders across Australia in the transport sector. The bureau features over 60 speakers from a range of transport modes and specialities, all with unique perspectives to share. And this afternoon's panel are all drawn from the Speakers Bureau. The Speakers Bureau was set up to increase women's representation and visibility in public and professional events, which often lack gender balance, particularly in a male-dominated sector like transport. Having more women represented on panels and events is one way we can make change. For young women entering the industry, as they often say, if you can't see it, you can't be it. And the Speaker Bureau removes an excuse that I'm sure some of us have heard. Well, we couldn't find any qualified women to be on the panel. We'd love to, but we don't know any. So today's panel session on leading technology and transformation in the transport sector will showcase some of the amazing work that's being done by women across the sector. All of our speakers, as I mentioned, are drawn from, and our moderator are drawn from our Speakers Bureau. And it is now my pleasure to introduce the moderator for this session, Anne Moffat, who will introduce the panel. Anne is the Chief Operating Officer of the Department of Main Roads and Transport here in Brisbane and has been in this role since 2018, leading operations for an organisation with almost 9,000 staff. Anne has over 25 years' experience in the state and local government sectors, working in senior roles across the infrastructure programming and delivering areas, as well as urban and regional planning. Please welcome Anne and the panel.
So thank you for that lovely introduction, and since we wrote the introduction, we now have 11,000 staff in the transport and roads, so be careful. The next time I see you, we'll have taken over the world. Can I thank you for that lovely introduction, and before we kick off the panel, I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and acknowledge the elders past, present and emerging, and also acknowledge that traditional people and First Nations people are traditionally peoples that tell stories. And so part of our panel today is really about telling stories. So without any further ado, with this super cool panel, who are slightly intimidating if I'm being honest, can I firstly introduce Carolyn Walsh. She is well known as... She gets a clap. Come on, people. This is a fun panel. Between me and drinks, we're going to have some fun. So she's well known in Australia's transport sector with over 35 years' experience, and she's only 34, in Commonwealth and New South Wales public services, focused on industry, science and transport issues. Carolyn holds many roles, including as the chair of the National Transport Commission. And then Rahila David. Rahila, come on down. She's the Executive Director of the Centre for Connected and Autonomous Transport, or CCAT, a government, industry, academia and community collaboration focused on facilitating the transition to a connected and automated transport future in Australia and New Zealand. Rahila's background is in leading regulatory reform, mostly in developing the safety assurance framework to enable the commercial deployment of automated vehicles in Australia. Third is Celia Troseth. She's Vice President of APAC and General Manager Australia of Q-Free ASA. She's worked in the ITS industry for almost 20 years with a focus around helping reduce congestion and pollution, improve road safety, finance infrastructure and promote smarter cities. And last but by no means least is Professor Flora Salim. And Flora is the inaugural Cisco Chair of Digital Transport for the University of New South Wales in Sydney. Her research is human-centric AI and machine learning for behaviour understanding, predictive analytics and intelligent assistance. She's produced significant research publications and patents and has led real-world outcomes and industry translations. And I would like to thank the National Transport Commission and particularly to my colleague and friend Cathy McDermott for putting this panel together and thank them for their support and acknowledge those of you who are from TMR in the room. There's a couple of you. Special shout out to Kim. She sent me a text, I'll be cheering for you. So, welcome to this amazing panel. They should come with, well, they probably already do come with some sort of cape. So, unfortunately, we won't have time today to take audience questions. So, I hope I've interpreted what I think you would want to ask these people if you had the privileged position I do, which is to talk to these amazing women. So, I have messed with what we came up with as the panel order. And we're going to take this conversation. We're going to kick off first by talking about the challenge for barriers for women in transport. Now, I say that I have the privilege also of being the gender equity champion in my department, and we do hear about it a lot and we do see it. But seeing you all here today, hearing their bio, shows me there are fantastic opportunities expected to come from the growth, particularly in that new technology space. So I'm going to kick off firstly with you, Celia, which is, what is it about the transport sector that's a great sector for women? What are the opportunities in that future workforce? How can we leverage those? Where's the opportunities that you're seeing?
I see a lot of opportunities in this sector. It's a dynamic sector, it's growing, and we need people. So there's a lot of opportunity for women, whether you're an engineer or you're in logistics, policy making, project planning, business development. There is a lot of opportunity in this sector in general. I think we need to be a little bit better to tell positive stories about what our sector does to attract people. And I think that would make it easier for people to understand what this sector is all about. You know, we build sustainable traffic solutions, we build livable cities, we build a better future for everyone in our communities. And I think if we can get that story out there, more people will come as well, because there's a lot of opportunity in this sector.
Very positive. Carolyn, I'm not going to say anything about the fact that you may have had the longest experience amongst us.
Oh, really?
Except to say that you probably had the longest experience amongst us. What do you see as the opportunities into that future?
Yeah, look, it's interesting. I probably am a little bit older than the other people in the panel, and, you know, I entered into my career in the 1980s, in the Jurassic period of the last century, and in a male-dominated field.
The 80s was only 20 years ago. That's what I say.
In a male-dominated field, I was an economist in the industry department. It was very white-collar, but it was still very male-dominated. And I've got to say, I've just been a little bit blind to any barriers or things that you can't do. Maybe it's because I grew up in a country pub with 5 brothers, you know. My mother went into the bar and said, women are going to be able to drink in this bar. And I thought women can do anything, you know. So I never really felt about looking for the barriers. I could tell some funny stories about, you know, some gender bias things over the
drinks
years.
later if you'd like to hang around.
Yeah, but we'll go 20 years later, or 16 years later, getting into transport in the early noughties. I just love this sector because it's real, it's providing real services, your point, Celia. Up until then, I'd been an economist with the Commonwealth Department, all good, but quite esoteric. I was responsible for bringing down those barriers that caused the global thing that meant that we had a problem in our supply chain with COVID. So anyway, that's my history. So getting into transport, where the rubber hits the road, literally, people are doing real things for real people. And the people who work in this sector, from the front line through to strategy and policy, it's just a really positive place to work. So I agree with you. I think in a way we've got to go beyond saying, you know, we know there are barriers, not such for women and some diversity, but I think we should celebrate where it is there. And I see so many more women in the industry now, in engineering positions and train drivers and, you know, in the trucking industry and all that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of positives there, and it's a terrific industry.
Fantastic. And we did, when we talked as a panel, we said we'll sort of mix things up. But I am going to ask this question of all of you. So next, Rahila, if you want to add to that, what do you see as the opportunities in your part of this world?
Yes, so it's a very diverse sector, and it's got a lot of innovation there as well. I think what I will say is, as you've mentioned, there is a lot of diversity, and I am seeing that particularly in the younger cohort. I'm seeing a lot of women and diverse people in research in particular, in consulting and government as well. So I think there's a real responsibility now to sort of take that talent, that diverse talent that we have in that younger cohort, and make sure it's progressed into those senior roles of the future.
And last but by no means least, for the second time,
yeah, so I actually sit cross-sector. So I'm a women in transport, like everyone here, but also women in AI. And actually, this actually brings
2 capes for you.
The difficulty is actually breaking through that aspect of being a woman and basically actually found what makes me stay in this area is the problem that we are solving is challenging and fun. And that's actually the sort of stuff that actually have to attract the others to work with us, because there's a lot of still open problems. And also, if we can solve the understanding of how people move across modes, across jurisdictions, and there's a lot of dynamic behaviors in that, and being able to service that, right? We can solve that problem. That problem itself, the skills to solve that problem is actually adaptable to so many domains. So I started with using machine learning to understand behavior of road safety or road users, for example. And I now have gone through a lot of different behaviors of people movement, even energy use, and all kinds. So this is what makes it exciting. And I think women brings a completely different point of view, because we tend to multitask. We tend to think out of the box. And I think we bring a very different flavor to the industry.
Fantastic. I'm up with you on the multitasking. That's my entire job. Now, I'm going to stick with you, actually, because we were talking before about, in Australia we have 3 levels of government. We also have multiple peak bodies and industry groups. We also have, the community, who is probably at the centre of all of those pieces, and different regulations, different practices, and an emerging world, really, for you. So how do you deal with those challenges, and what drives you to keep going, and how do you find the approach works with getting all of those different ducks lined up?
So,
Big question.
What I believe, yes, we always face with the, we think limitations of jurisdictions, and in fact, sadly, working in, collaborating with a lot of people from transport industry, a lot of projects are very, very specific. It's very case study specific or project specific, location-based specific. But coming from AI, I see a lot more power that's coming from knowledge that's transferable. So maybe the data is not transferable. They could be very specific, but knowledge is. And you can see now, even from how many of you have been using ChatGPT, right? And that GPT model is actually transferable to a lot of different tasks. And that's basically what we can do. And I've been giving a lot of examples. Whenever, for example, people from other jurisdictions that never worked with me before, but I had a lot of experience, for example, with federal and also state government agencies from New South Wales and Victoria, for example, I actually give them examples where knowledge can be easily transferable and you can speed it up with AI. So, for example, we had a project we dealt with Mornington Peninsula Shire and Melbourne City Council on, for example, parking availability prediction. But that was done during COVID. There's no data because people didn't come. Right?
I'm sorry, I find that amusing. The one time we'll do it is when nobody's parking. Excellent results.
It was actually a federal government funded. We had to deliver by July 2020. The system had to go live July 2020.
Don't talk about this outside of this room, folks.
But we had to deliver a predictive model that works, and it will have to long last 5-10 years. How do we do that? With not much data. The sensor was only installed January 2020, started collecting data February. We did what we call, again, pre-trained model, like the foundation model, pre-trained model from City of Melbourne, more than 5 years of data, domain adaptation to Rye Township, Mornington Township, and all those things, and actually worked. And this is where you can see the power of AI and democratizing that model and the knowledge transfer.
That's kind of cool. I'm going to flick that one also then to you, Carolyn, because you've worked at a couple of different levels and seen it from a couple of different areas. How do you deal with that multiple levels?
Yeah, well, welcome to the nightmare that is the National Transport Commission's job, is to really wrangle between the Commonwealth and state and local governments in terms of getting reform across this country. And over the years, of the many years I've been involved in Commonwealth state things in different domains, you get these things about competitive federalism. Is it good that we've got different states all doing different things? And then cooperative federalism. Are we trying to work together? I really prefer the cooperative federalism model myself. One of the major things that we're working on in the National Transport Commission at the moment is rail interoperability. I don't know how many of you from the road sector knows, we do not have a single national railroad in Australia. They connect, all these different rail infrastructure networks connect, and the trains go across them all. Did you know that if you're a train driver, Once you get past Albury, a red over green signal means something different to if you're north of Albury, even though you're still on the Australian Rail Track Corporation's network. So we have this huge challenge about as these railways are bringing in new digital systems for communications and signalling. If we don't get the cooperation amongst all of those networks, you won't be able to have your Android phone talk to your Apple phone as you're going across that network. This is hugely complex in a federal system where you've got different levels of government funding different things and winners and losers about that investment.
Queensland should always win, Karen.
Queensland always does try and
narrow
win,
gauge.
so it's a huge challenge, and really it's about getting people of goodwill with good information, trying to weed out the detail where people are being siloed and looking after their own patch and trying to think of the bigger picture for the good of the country, and it's fun. I just as a, if you want to sort of talk about picking big problems and seeing if we can solve them. So the last 4 years, the National Transport Commissioner has managed to get rail interoperability as one of the 8 cabinet priorities for the National Cabinet in this country.
Woohoo! Woohoo! Yes, that does deserve a clap. I know what that looks like from all of the emails I get from the National Transport Commission.
Can I add one?
Yes, you absolutely can.
Thing to this, because in Q3 we work with ITS and cooperative ITS, and I think this is one of the issues that we have at the moment. The state government has been great in driving adoption and deployment of CITS project like TMR with CAVI, AIMS in Victoria, City in New South Wales. But what we really need is this national consistent approach on how we talk to each other, how we harmonise between the states, so we don't get into this issue that we've had with the rail sector. And this is happening with the draft principles for national approach for CITS. But I think it's just really important that we start there. We start with harmonising and speaking the same language, making sure we have the same security models, so we can actually work together.
It's interesting. It's actually people. Actually people in the supply chain who are starting to point out to governments in Australia that we're crazy. They're the ones saying, we're making a whole lot of money, but did you know that it actually costs you more to deliver an infrastructure project in Australia than it does in Europe? And why? Because you don't have these harmonised standards and stuff. So it's just a no-brainer in terms of where we've got to move forward, in my view.
And I think in terms of technology and regulation, I think, what's worked in the past, and for example with the automated vehicle work that the NTC is doing, you have to think about what the objectives are that you're trying to achieve from the technology. So it could be, standardisation, it could be encouraging investment, it could be, the safest deployment possible, most regulatory efficiency, not advantaging one community over another. It's really understanding those objectives that helps you to then guide through regulatory reform, and then you come to those outcomes like standardised principles for CITS, for example.
And look, if I stick with you, because you've still got the microphone, and there's probably a question for you here too, Celia, which is around if we look at sort of changes in that technology, and it is rapid, as you point out, Carolyn, that ability to get Apple to talk to Android as an example, how rapid is it in Australia? Like, are we seeing that are we fast? Are we slow? I mean, what does that look like in your world, either from a research or deployment perspective? So if you could both comment on that.
Yeah, there's a few different aspects to it. I think in terms of, so my area is automated transport and connected transport, and in terms of automated vehicles in particular, we have seen sort of a number of trials. There has been a lot of duplication in those trials, I'd say, but we're starting to see more diverse trials now, and trucks and the like. In terms of the regulation, there's certainly a lot of work that's been going on there for about 8 years now, and I think that momentum probably could be reinvigorated, I think, but there's certainly work that's been going on in that space to prepare for the technology before it gets deployed. And then on the infrastructure side as well, a lot of research going into that to understand how to accommodate these new kinds of vehicles. So I think there is a lot of movement. I think Australia's I would say ahead, particularly in terms of the regulation. Australia is seen as a leader on that front, but I think there's definitely a lot to do to sort of keep that momentum and make sure that we are prepared when these new technologies come onto our roads.
In terms of tolling technology, Australia was very early on interoperable between the different states. We don't have that in the US, for example, so Australia is very far ahead in certain aspects of ITS and road technology, transport technology, I would say, but also looking towards Europe, where they have the standards are written in Europe, many of them, and also looking to the regulations that are happening in Europe as well, especially around security models, I would say, and how that's deployed in Europe. So I think we're advanced in the technology, but also looking to regulation in Europe.
I think you were jumping. I felt like you were jumping at something there. Go.
I just want to have a very quick comment. I'm not a standard interoperability person, but some of the approach we've been doing is, if you're reluctant to share data, keep it. But we can have the intelligence sitting on the edge, and that can make it more robust because you can have decentralized mechanisms of the smarts on each of the edge devices, it is the smartphones, and then you can then federate the insights that way. The distributed collective intelligence is the next thing we should go and thinking about rather than data sharing, but it's actually model and knowledge sharing.
A fantastic message there. And in looking at when we are sort of talking about knowledge sharing, it just brings me to that comment we were talking about when we did that hookup, just in how do we attract people to this sector? A lot of us work in either government or quasi-government or alongside government or smack bang in government. How do we attract people, particularly into this sector? I'm going to ask you, Carolyn. How do you see, has it changed? Are we seeing more? What are you seeing is the bit that will attract people? I'll take the comment that you said before, which is that you love the sector. In my language, it's because we get stuff done. But there must be something else that you think is going to attract people to this sector, particularly women, but...
Yeah, look, I just think for younger people coming through, we've got to actually show this is now a digital era and this is a sector that is actually very much digitally based and actually promoted as such, like get away from that notion that this is, last century technologies. It's an exciting sector to be in. So I think the other thing is we've got to get away from the notion in transport that it's a lifelong career. So I think we've got to be accepting of the fact that people are going to come in and out of this sector as they will in other places and bring their skills and be ready to do that. Youngsters these days aren't going to stay with the one company, let alone all the same sector.
Youngsters aren't going to stay.
All that sort of stuff.
25 years, I'll have you know, Karen.
Yeah, but the
youngster.
Well, I've been in the sector 25 years too. So I think it's just about pushing the positives about the industry. I do think that as an industry, we need to increasingly do that in a proactive way and collectively. And sell the good news stories about what transport does and present it in a, look, let's face it, just in a way that's sexy to people who are coming through. The other thing too is a woman at a conference that the NTC held earlier this year was just really passionate about getting into schools early, like primary. Don't wait till secondary, don't wait till tertiary, like get in at primary schools and excite young people about the sector, the opportunities, the myriad of the sort of careers that they can have in this sector over a lifetime. So I think that was a really important point too.
I feel like this was not this panel where you thought we were going to talk about how sexy we all are, but we are. And when you think about that, for example, in my own department, correct. In my own department, here we are. There's 80 different careers. You could literally... we've had people be born and I'm pretty sure there were some who will die there, but there's also some who, hopefully not while they're at the job. But there are people who will come and go. In fact, I suspect that the people who get those 25-year certificates we may not see many of those anymore, but if you are in my department, you will get a certificate. You'll also get a lovely plaque. It's on wood, it's engraved, and it has your years. And when I received one and my former Director General looked at me and he said to me, 25 years, did you start when you were 6? I just about fell in love with him. And then I showed it to my nephew, he's 19 and staying with us, and he looked at me and said, is that thing they'd put on your coffin? So I don't think TMR's doing a great job of attracting long service awards, but anyway, we will have to wrap up shortly. So there is a question and I want all of you to answer. So I'm going to start at my left, Flora, which is, look, there's an amazing wealth. You could probably pick, we could stay here for another hour. I feel like the conversation may go down a notch, but I feel like there's a lot of wealth that we could pull from here. But what I'd like to sort of is some key takeaways, and each of you can address either both or any part of this, which is sort of that question about what would you tell your younger self, or what would be something you'd do differently, or what was that defining moment in your career that's led you to be here?
So when I tried to decide the topic of my PhD, I saw during the same week, I walked past through an intersection and there were like 3 crashes. And that was the defining...
Don't walk near an intersection. That's the moral of the story.
Well, I was like, I got to do something about it. And I'm actually very interested to know. So if you're actually passionate about a cause, do it. And people, when people talk to me about what I did my PhD, but now I completed about 12 years ago now, so gave away my age. But it was so niche, AI machine learning, but for intersection safety, that was so niche. But now I'm very proud about it. And I was thinking that, actually, as I said, I'm very happy I took that road, because now I'm glad I can tell my younger self, yes, do AI because it's hot now.
Yeah.
And you do mobility AI because that can be a platform to enable future cities.
Great.
Hells yeah.
Yes, I think you needed the applause for that.
Yeah. We did say we could pull each other up if we didn't agree with something, but I've not yet found a thing I don't agree with on these women, so this is not easy.
What would I tell my younger self? I guess to be confident and know it's going to be okay. I think it's difficult when you come out of uni, because you need experience to gain confidence. And when you come out of uni, you sort of go, okay, did I end up in the right place? Is this my path? Is this where I'm going to go? And it took me a while to find my why. Why am I here? Now it's crystal clear for me why I'm in this sector. This is the place to be. This is where we make change and we create cities and help communities connect. We do so many amazing things in this industry. But I guess I wish what I had back then was maybe early on sponsors or early on mentors or supporters. Because if you can, and I guess this is a call out to everyone as well, if you have the opportunity to support someone or give an opportunity to someone, not everyone will tick all the boxes, but they might tick some boxes. They might have a great drive and a great passion and a great interest in this field, and that might be enough. And I think if you can help someone by supporting them, they can find their purpose as well. So I think that's kind of finding their why and helping people along the way is probably my call out to everyone.
That also deserves a clap. And a little bit of homework for each of you to reach out a hand to provide some sponsorship and mentorship. Rahila.
For me, I think something that's really important is sort of regular periods of self-reflection and understanding your development needs. I think, when I made a choice at a certain point in my career to step away and do some further studies, and that was a really that was a choice I made after thinking about what is it that I enjoy in my career, what is it that I want to see in my career going forward, and then realising that required me to go and do a bit of extra work. So it's really thinking about how you develop outside of your particular job that you're currently in at the moment. And I think those regular check-ins to have that acknowledgement about where you're at, what you enjoy, and where you see yourself in the future, that's so important to be able to do that and then understand your own development needs outside of your particular workplace.
And reflection is something I think we can take away from this. This is one of those moments that you stop and think. So thank you. Clap for you as well.
And I was actually going to say something very similar. What I'd tell my younger self is to don't be just so focused on work. I actually was very focused on work. I loved it. I didn't have any kids and all that sort of stuff, and I just loved the work I was doing. And I probably didn't take enough time out for self-reflection, fitness, although you wouldn't believe that, would you? And
Sexy moments.
And just like I stopped playing sport too early. I should have kept on playing cricket for the next 10 years and not go, I can't get off to cricket training at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's a bad thing to do.
Still, your knees are saying thank you.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm glad that I gave up smoking, so that was a good thing. But, so a little bit more looking after yourself and your holistic self and reflecting on who you are as a whole person in terms of work and your career, because I think, and also being prepared to take the sideway movements. If you're ambitious, and not everyone's ambitious to go up a ladder, but if you're ambitious, there's sometimes the biggest, my biggest career move really was one day when I'd first moved to Sydney. I'd worked in this organisation for 6 months and I hated the culture. It just didn't sit with my ethics. It was very arrogant, non-communicative, non-consultative, just went against every grain in my body. And somebody rang me up. I was doing, economic policy generally. And somebody rang me up and said, are you the Carolyn Walsh from Canberra who blah, blah, blah? Oh, this is Jane here. Do you want to work in rail? And I went, yes. Best career move I ever made. So sometimes you don't overplan.
And I know, unfortunately, that does mean we are at a conclusion. Now, ladies and gentlemen, can you join with me again in thanking this fantastic panel? I get the feeling that this is a panel that we should do at least every year. Clap for that, ladies and gentlemen. Just a hint there, Michael. I think what's really lovely is just to spend that moment talking amongst ourselves around where are those opportunities, what do we need to do, and the wealth and the breadth and the depth of experience that we have for women in transport more generally. So thank you for sharing that with us. Thank you to NTC for the opportunity to be here, and enjoy drinks, and I dare say we'll have further conversations as we're doing that. So thank you very much. Enjoy.